Mansour Karam, the CEO of Apstra, opened the second day of Net Events in California 2017 with a keynote speech on a new development in the data center, intent-based networking. He opened by describing an ordinary day in 2025, where you give voice instructions to the computer in your self-driving car, and the machines understand what you want and just get on with it. Apparently, it's all a matter of allowing computers to manage the detail, and Karam explained how it's all going to work.
But then there is many technologies that I would call infrastructure technologies that were critical to make it all happen. And in fact, they're critical to the transformation that we call digital transformation. They're at the core of all of those technologies that are making, that have the potential of really changing our lives. And so all of these technologies are now and they're available today. And that's great. Now, but that's not all, right? Also, let's consider the number of endpoints joining the network. Today, you have 11 billion IoT devices. By 2020, that number is going to 30 billion. And by 2025, that number is going to be 80 billion. In fact, it's estimated that 152,000 devices will be joining the network every minute. For every one of those devices that joins the network, essentially they're going to be generating traffic that is disproportional to, that will increase disproportionately. In fact, that device, when it joins the network, is going to connect to many other devices and many other users. And so if the increase in devices is exponential, the increase in traffic is actually doubly exponential. In fact, we're witnessing a network traffic explosion that we have never seen before. I was at a service provider event earlier this week, and they were saying how traffic is increasing by 50% year over year. And of course, those hyperscale companies have recognized the problem. And for the last 10 years, they've worked diligently with the vendor community in order to really build the type of foundational network that will support this trend, essentially in terms of bandwidth, scale out, networks that can scale out. In terms of reliability, these networks need to be extremely reliable, but also in terms of automation, the ability to operate these networks in a massively automated way at scale. So what about the rest of us? As a result, these companies, of course, have become leaders. They have gained market dominance, and they have a competitive edge that is really hard to surmount. So what about the rest of us? These technologies are now all available, and therefore, every CIO is very aware that they need to be part of this digital transformation. They need to embrace IoT, machine learning, artificial intelligence. In fact, CIOs know that there is no such thing as the traditional business today. You're either a digital business or you can't compete. Even think of businesses that you consider traditional, like an insurance company. Today, available to these insurance companies is IoT data from every car out there, every mobile phone. In fact, they should be able to gather all this information and then analyze it through machine learning, and that should be able to guide their premiums to their customers. And if they're not doing that, then their competitor will, and they will be unable to compete. So every business needs to be transforming digitally and taking advantage of those technologies. But there is a little problem. The industry has a little secret that I'd like to share. 85% of networking teams today still operate their networks like they did in 1995. Essentially manually, box per box, using command lines which are arcane and specific to every hardware vendor. In fact, they operate their networks the way, in what is the equivalent of assembly language for those boxes. I mean, 1995, how many of you remembers Windows 95? In fact, that was the hottest operating system. In fact, it transformed the industry back in 1995. That's it. I may have find one of those maybe at one of the old libraries, public libraries out there, but this is quite extinct. Or this phone, that was the hottest phone in 1995, Nokia. Does anyone remember Nokia? Nokia phones? And actually, I came to the US in 1995. That's a picture of myself with my dad when we first visited Stanford when I got here. That was 22 years ago. Clearly, that was a long, long time ago, judging from this picture. The point is, 1995 is a really long time ago. And trying to embrace digital transformation and machine learning and be part of the IoT trend, yet operating your network like you did in 1995 is the equivalent of wanting to build the house of your dreams, yet being unwilling or unable to invest in a proper foundation. Not a great idea. In fact, your digital initiatives will fail if you don't change how you operate your network. And if I'm not the only one saying it, leading analysts out there are saying, and certainly CIOs are very aware of this. But there is good news. As an industry, as a networking industry, we have been working very hard to solve this problem. And certainly, at Apstra, the company was founded back in 2014 to address exactly this gap. And us, along with others in the industry, are really working to deliver on solutions to this problem. And of course, we live and breathe this every day. And so, the product that we delivered is called AOS. And so through delivering this product, which came to market last year, we learned a few lessons, which I'd like to share with you here. What's really needed is a self-operating network. It's a network that essentially delivers on autonomous operations. This means that the human factor needs to be taken out of how we operate our networks. The networks needs to be able to self-configure, to fix itself, to defend itself, to document itself. And in order to achieve this, we've looked at approaches of automation out there, and we concluded that critical attributes are intent-based, closed-loop, and vendor-agnostic. So let me describe these a bit for you. Intent-based is the notion that as a user, the way you interface with the system is by describing your desired outcome as opposed to describing the specifics of how you want to get it done. So if I were to take a self-driving car analogy, and this analogy actually works quite well. A self-driving car is very sophisticated. The software needs to be very intelligent, and in fact, I would submit that infrastructure is even harder. It has more components, and it's even a harder problem. And so, in a self-driving car, ideally as a driver, you get in, and you just tell the car where you want it to go. That's intent-based. In fact, you may also have some opinions. You may say, well, actually, on my way to work, if my laundry is ready, I'd like to pick up my laundry along the way. And your car should be able to kind of, include that constraint as part of its algorithm in terms of delivering on your intent. So that's intent-based. Now, there has been approaches to automation in the past, but what was missing is this second attribute, which is closed loop. And again, if I were to think of a self-driving car, it would be impossible for this self-driving car to get you to your destination if it's not gathering telemetry of its environment. And in fact, self-driving cars do. They have thousands of sensors gathering thousands of parameters every second. And the software is building a notion of the actual state. The car is aware of its environment. And the software compares this actual state to the desired state, which is derived from your intent. And then, based on this comparison, the software controls the car to make the adjustments so that the car continues delivering on your intent and driving you safely to your destination. And if the changes are outside the capabilities of the software, then the software will recognize this and will generate an anomaly and alert the driver to take the wheel again. That's closed loop. And it's critical to delivering on an autonomous infrastructure. And then the third attribute here is vendor agnostic. If you're interfacing with your system by describing what you want rather than the specifics of the commands for that specific vendor's hardware, then you have a major opportunity here to decouple your operational model from the specifics of the vendors underneath, and therefore you have the ability to become hardware vendor independent. And of course, every infrastructure out there, every data center infrastructure out there comprises hardwares from multiple vendors. So becoming vendor independent is critical to delivering on this vision. When you think of an autonomous, on the software delivering on autonomous operations, then especially when you consider the intent and the sliding scale of intent have it being at the high level, but also providing the opportunity to describe your specific constraints and opinions, and the gathering the telemetry from all of the devices in the network to continuously validate that your infrastructure is delivering per your intent. I think it should be clear that at the core of the problem is a large distributed state management problem. And certainly we've recognized that, and the core of our system is a distributed data store that is a repository of all of the state in your infrastructure. And it's not only a matter of scaling out the collection of the state, but also what is needed is representing the state in a way that captures all of the relationships between the physical environment, your virtual environment, your logical entities, and all of the telemetry. And once you do that, and only once you do that, do you have an ability for the software to powerfully reason about the state and to provide the deep visibility to the operator as to what's going on in their network, both of which are critical to delivering on the vision of an autonomous infrastructure. And doing this properly involves layering in all of the abstractions so that the majority of your code is vendor agnostic and only specific components, we call them device agents, very much like device drivers, which I think we're all familiar with, that are experts at the specific devices that they're controlling. So you would have a device agent for specific vendors' hardware that are experts at extracting the capabilities from that hardware, essentially either pushing the configurations or gathering the telemetry. And outside of those agents, the software itself is vendor agnostic. And if you implement software such as this in your infrastructure, then you'll get benefits that you really cannot do without. Massive improvements in agility, which really enables you to recoup the revenue from being able to deliver on your business services, on your initiatives on time. Massive reduction in outages. We know that 80% of outages are caused by human error. Massive reduction in operational expenses. We know that organizations spend $3 to $4 operating every dollar of CapEx, and 80% of it is manual, redundant manual operations. And so you can see how you can easily recoup your entire CapEx spend by implementing this technology. Last and not least, you can refocus your engineers. Instead of your engineers spending 80% of their time running mundane tasks manually, they can retrain, hone their skills to become instrumental to the areas of the business that are more strategic to you. And it's been really great to see the excitement around this technology. Clearly, there is a massive gap out there. Since we launched last year, we've generated revenue globally, and we're very pleased to see the largest vendors, the leaders in networking, jump on this as well. So I'm very excited, and I'm very optimistic that we're going to be solving this problem starting today and in the next years ahead. And so, really, when you look at the skyscraper, I like this analogy. Ultimately, you spend a lot more time building the foundation, and the foundation is the most critical. And I submit that the network is really at the foundation of everything else you're doing. And we're working diligently to really build the right foundation for your business in order to enable you to deliver successfully on your digital initiatives, and so that you have the ability to compete effectively. Thank you.
Scott Rainovich, Principal Analyst at Futurium, then interviewed Karam on stage for 15 minutes and finally drew the session to a close.